myself to do that because I didn't realize I was in charge of everything. Somewhere around, I came from a devout family. I learned all the typical life experiences since we were Mormons. I did all the things most kids do in that culture, so I was glad to be there. God's not culture-oriented, I found. God cares about each person, and your culture is merely a portion of what you choose to conquer when you arrived here, since our real program is to love everyone unconditionally. That's hard work, and many individuals aren't willing to put it in. I eventually realized that life's mission is to learn to love unconditionally. That means you must love negative people as much as positive ones. It's up to them to accept that experience or love. That's hard for some individuals, as it was at first for me, but I eventually saw past the darkness and those unpleasant experiences. When I started hearing voices, my grandfather, who had died 10 years earlier, came to me and shared knowledge. I realized he would answer any question I asked. He replied it as best he could on his spirit level. I realized that there are many stations or levels, and we or they try to move up to where they hold or obtain more light. All of this is to learn to cling to love and spread it. After a long time, I discovered that true happiness comes from integrating those things into your consciousness and expressing them. Jesus did this. Like everyone else, he learned line by line. He took a long time, as did Buddha and other masters. They started by learning to regulate their ideas and minds. As they improved, they reached for higher levels of comprehension, which took them to places most people wouldn't go, largely because they weren't willing to work for it. It's simple yet not easy. As I grew and learned, I let go of many of the dogmas in most religions. Dogma and the drive to be superior than others are present in even Christian religions. Let those thoughts go. You can't grow by circling or working around them. Thus, you must abandon the concept that you are exceptional, better, or receive more. One of my difficulties with priesthood and authority is that individuals assume they can control others, which isn't true. This is about being one with others and loving them enough to balance with them. When you accomplish it on a higher level, those in the spirit realm on those levels are attracted to you, and you're attracted to them, so you communicate and commune with them. The scriptures say, "You become one with me as I'm one with the Father." I think Jesus meant this. He also said, "I'll appear to you when you accomplish this." Finding folks who've had that experience is challenging, but I started looking. In the 19... I'm Mike Rick. I reside in the U.S. and have experienced the opposite side of the veil. I began my story as a young man. I realized I was hearing voices from the other side of the curtain. They were attempting to talk to me. Some were initially positive, some negative. No more negative voices, only happy ones. It took time to train myself to do that because I didn't realize I was in charge of everything. Somewhere around, I came from a devout family. I learned all the typical life experiences since we were Mormons. I did all the things most kids do in that culture, so I was glad to be there. God's not culture-oriented, I found. God cares about each person, and your culture is merely a portion of what you choose to conquer when you arrived here, since our real program is to love everyone unconditionally. That's hard work, and many individuals aren't willing to put it in. I eventually realized that life's mission is to learn to love unconditionally. That means you must love negative people as much as positive ones. It's up to them to accept that experience or love. That's hard for some individuals, as it was at first for me, but I eventually saw past the darkness and those unpleasant experiences. When I started hearing voices, my grandfather, who had died 10 years earlier, came to me and shared knowledge. I realized he would answer any question I asked. He replied it as best he could on his spirit level. I realized that there are many stations or levels, and we or they try to move up to where they hold or obtain more light. All of this is to learn to cling to love and spread it. After a long time, I discovered that true happiness comes from integrating those things into your consciousness and expressing them. Jesus did this. Like everyone else, he learned line by line. He took a long time, as did Buddha and other masters. They started by learning to regulate their ideas and minds. As they improved, they reached for higher levels of comprehension, which took them to places most people wouldn't go, largely because they weren't willing to work for it. It's simple yet not easy. As I grew and learned, I let go of many of the dogmas in most religions. Dogma and the drive to be superior than others are present in even Christian religions. Let those thoughts go. You can't grow by circling or working around them. Thus, you must abandon the concept that you are exceptional, better, or receive more. One of my difficulties with priesthood and authority is that individuals assume they can control others, which isn't true. This is about being one with others and loving them enough to balance with them. When you accomplish it on a higher level, those in the spirit realm on those levels are attracted to you, and you're attracted to them, so you communicate and commune with them. The scriptures say, "You become one with me as I'm one with the Father." I think Jesus meant this. He also said, "I'll appear to you when you accomplish this." Finding folks who've had that experience is challenging, but I started looking. In the 1990s, I encountered people who had personal experiences with Christ, which I wanted. I craved such encounters. I wanted to study, grow, and progress, regardless of who taught me. However, the highest teachings I could obtain from the other side usually featured Christ because his foundation is love and loving others. I became closer to him in my daily life till I could hear his voice clearly. I appreciate hearing his voice and talking to him even now. But he doesn't share what most people want. They have all these secrets and want to know what they are, but the only mystery I desire is how to obtain more light. How do I feel love when people return from near death? They generally say, "I had this tremendous feeling of love everywhere. It was so boundless, and it consumed me, and it went through every cell of my body." I didn't know what that was like until I went through it, but not nearly dying. I did it spontaneously. My death prevented it, but I learned about the spirit world. Several visitors from the other side arrived. My wife was quite spiritual, but when these things started happening, she was very receptive, so it was easy for me to talk about it. Having something in common was helpful. As I continued along this path, I wanted to know Jesus personally. I learned that from my granddad and our conversations. He once answered my queries when I approached him. After he stated something, he and I asked another question, and the answer made me say, "Well, wait a minute, that's not you who speaks." I intuitively realized it was Christ. He said, "The one you're supposed to be listening to is him, not me. I've taken you as far as I can go." I said, "Well, okay." For 5 or 6 months, Jesus channeled everything I received from the other side of the veil, and it was the best time of my life. I can't express how much I enjoy talking to him and getting a quick response. I grew so lot during this time. Share a story. He said, "I've got a really special message for you I want you to know." I said, "Okay, what's that?" He said, "Well, I'm going to tell you out in the desert. So go out in the desert, prepare yourself, and I'll come to you when you're there." I was like, this has got to be cool. I'm excited for this. April was like now, but warmer. I drove my Jeep to Utah's West Desert and scaled a little hill. It was grassy and wooded. I threw out a blanket, laid down on my back, and looked up. I started concentrating, praying, or meditating, but I was asking the Lord, "Okay, I'm here. What do you have to say to me?" He said, "I just wanted you to know that you can hear my voice just as well here as you home, so go back home, and let's keep talking." And I thought, well, that's kind of crazy. As Christ stated, you can do that from home, residence, or closet. My life started changing for the better. I have 5 children. One has died, and my daughter, who died years ago, occasionally writes to me. 2 years ago, it was July 4. My daughter started communicating to me while I was driving. I say, "Whoa, what? Where are you here?" And she says, "I'm here to let you know that somebody close to you is going to pass on." I say, "Really? Who is it?" And she says, "Well, we can't tell you that because you would change your behavior towards them, and we don't want you to do that. We want you to be natural and not change your behavior." I'm like, oh my gosh, my mom is almost 90. I thought, well, maybe my mom's going to pass on, maybe something like that's going to happen. I talked to my kids and friends who understood. Oh, I expected this would happen in 3 months, but it didn't. It was 6 months later, before Christmas. Cougars killed my small Yorkie puppy. I went seeking for the dog, and we located and brought the carcass home. As I entered my house, I saw my deceased daughter standing across my kitchen with my little puppy licking her face. A terrific licker. She looks at me and says, "I told you." I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, this is the one who's close to me. It was a pup I kept for 5 years. This dog was excellent. So those kinds of things happen, and my testimony, my experience of all of this, led me to a place where I realized there's so much more to life than you think, because there's a whole world beyond this world that we can access if we choose to. The most crucial part of choosing is learning to believe, to trust that you'll be taught and shared with in a way that will help you grow, improve in your spiritual awareness, in your light. I experienced an encounter that relates to these concepts. After 5 months with Jesus, he told me he was passing me over to my Father in heaven, who formed my spirit, and that I should listen to him now. As I developed a new relationship with my Father and talked about my Father in heaven, Jesus said, "I'll never be away from you. You can always call on me." We operate on the same level of understanding. So I said, okay, and I started communicating with my Father in heaven around 1995. From then to today, he's talked to me and shared stuff, but I'll tell you one anecdote. I was driving or strolling down the road and remember where it was. We're talking while I ask my Father questions. He's answered certain questions and said, "That's not pertinent to your growth right now, but it'll be given to you later on, so don't worry about it." So I put it on the shelf and let it go. Anyway, I'm driving along, and he says, "Mike, how long are you going to continue to hear my voice?" And I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of a trick question. Now, people on the other side of the veil always know how you'll answer a question, so they ask it and are 3 steps ahead of you. You can try to avoid it or outwit them, but you never will, at least not me. So I'm saying, okay, are you going to stop talking to me? Well, I'm hoping I'm going to hear your voice forever. And he says, well, do you want to be a servant forever? And I say, wait a second, servant's not bad. So I'm arguing with him, and I say, but Jesus said that he was the greatest among you as the servant of all. One of my children phones me and says, "Hey, Dad, I've got this problem at school," and she starts having this problem. And so I'm thinking, okay. So immediately I said, well, let me ponder on that. So I'm thinking, I'm going to go back and ask my Father how to deal with something like this. And I go back, hey, how should I handle this? And he says, well, do you want me to tell you what to do, or do you want to go with what you know inside? And I'm thinking, oh, okay. Now I'm thinking, he asked, do you want me to tell you what to do, or do you want to go with what you know? And that started happening often. I realized they wanted me to be one with them in my heart and know what to do. That's not always simple, since you could seem mean. Allow me to illustrate. If you see a beggar saying, hey, I need some money, can you give me some money? And you look at them, you can say, okay, yeah. What should you know? How should I handle this? What do I feel to do here? Not what am I being told to do, but what do I feel? And the other side will give you the feeling, so you can know where to go. Sometimes it's to help the person, and sometimes it's, no, don't help this person. We've spent several months getting them to this point where they finally humbled themselves and are ready to turn their life over to goodness and God. And if you help them right now, you're going to set them back a few days. So don't do anything. And so you look like a bad guy because you didn't help, but you were actually helping on a higher level. So I went through a lot of those things, and they were quite eye-opening because you learn how they function and think. They're not judgmental. This is difficult for individuals to tolerate. Near-death experiencers can empathize because they believe God is forgiving and does not judge. However, many who remain are judgmental of much, especially in the globe. Yet God loves them all equally. He loves wicked people who have harmed others. They don't come to him, but he'll always support them because they're his creation. I often hear, well, yeah, but God this and God that, and they don't realize God is all-encompassing. Perfect. He understands the beginning from the end. Can a flawless God make anything imperfect? Good question. Thus, we were all formed flawless. The difficulty is that we've grown to regard ourselves as imperfect rather than flawless. He or she doesn't see it because God is the essence of male and female, hence there is no gender. I learnt these things as I developed and progressed, and I discovered when the planet will alter. Big changes, massive stuff. When the earth rocks and tilts, this is serious. Spiritually unprepared people won't survive, which is tragic. All of them knew this before they came. They chose to come at this time knowing the earth would change, and many came to help others. They came here because they knew they could improve faster than anywhere else. They're attempting to grow and survive these events. We may see beyond all of that if we all try to perfect our inner self, our inner God. The scripture states, "You'll be changed in the twinkling of an eye." You'll pass through it. It's more like a personal rapture, and you can have it at any time if you push yourself to be so godlike that they can't withhold it. I tell people, go do it. Go find out, go learn what it's like to have this personal relationship with those on the other side, and especially those that carry a lot of light, that are perfected individuals, ascended individuals, translated individuals. Those are the ones that we want to find. The scripture talks about Enoch and his city being translated. That means what? These people, what? Where are they now? How are they? They live like what? I had these questions and went through these things. I testify that you are infinitely adored. You are loved, yet whatever wrong, terrible, or negative in your life can be erased, and you turn your heart over to the light, to God, to Christ, to any of these masters. Learn to emulate them. They got there by doing the same thing. You can too. We changed the environment, but your soul lives on. It's lived for ages and will live for more. Spirit never ends. It's interchangeable like its outfits. You may die, but you can't kill that spirit. God created it perfect and eternal. Thus my daughter will live eternally. She was like I remembered when I saw her. She had a brain tumor and died at 23, but she was just like I recalled. She was kind, wonderful, lively, active, and extroverted. I sensed her vibe when I saw her with my dog. On that level, like Christ or other masters, they can look whichever they need to help humanity progress. I'm arguing that after his resurrection, Jesus walks up to the apostles strolling along the road and starts talking. He didn't want them to recognize him at the time, but as soon as he started talking, they recognized his doctrine, the light coming from him. And they said, "Wait a second, Master, we know who this is," and he changed so they could recognize him. They can look as they need to help you improve via a mission. The best approach to connect with God is to give up your heart and not keep secrets, even though God knows every thought you and everyone else has. You cannot conceal anything. You can connect when you recognize it and open your heart to God. Until then, it's hard for people to connect to God, and we build up a barrier to that most of the time because so many people are frightened to communicate their faith in God, which is unfortunate. In my opinion, it's not. It's like talking to you now. I can talk to God because I believe I can, and when you believe that, they respond. As you listen deeper, they will always give you what is best for you. You can receive answers to a lot of things just by asking a question and having a problem. Call it a mortality issue. But ask God, and He'll answer. He may send an angel, or you may send a friend or deceased relative to answer the question, and you'll feel their presence. Learning to feel and acknowledge that can help you grow and talk to God better. When I try to get something for the future, we want to know since we're terrified of it, okay. We fear the future, and when we realize or bring that fear forward, they can assist you go past it. As for what's going to happen, I've reached a point in my life where I just let go of fear when all this stuff starts to go down, when we start seeing more earthquakes, more problems on the earth, dramatic weather, and so on. If you let go of it earlier, it's simpler to handle because God will shield you from everything. You can't be hurt since you're united with God's oneness. Your show's near-death experiences talk of oneness, which I sensed with everything, and it's true. Oneness exists. Why not feel that always when you're here? You can connect with that.